Hi there, and welcome to another episode of the Future of Jewish podcast. I'm your host, Joshua Hoffman. On this episode, I am joined by Amy Holtz. She is the co-founder of the Jewish Future Pledge and previously served as CEO of Mosaic United and president of OpenDor Media after more than 3 decades of experience leading and growing her own multimillion-dollar businesses, including Party City's largest franchise operation. A passionate advocate for Israel and the Jewish people, Amy has been named one of the Jerusalem Post's 50 most influential Jews. Enjoy my conversation with Amy Holtz. Amy, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me today. I'm really looking forward to this episode. Before we get into the great things that you have going on today, why don't you give us a peek behind the curtain, your background, where you came from, everything that led to where you are today?
First of all, Josh, thank you so much for having me. It's such a privilege to be here. So you're asking me to summarize 59 years in about 3 minutes.
That's right.
I'll try my best to do that. I grew up in South Florida, went to University of Florida, Florida Gator. I spent the first couple of years partying. That's what you do at UF. At the end of my junior year, I decided to get serious. And at that time, I thought life was all about making money. So I went into banking, became a lawyer, but I hated both of those jobs. So I joined a family business. When I joined, we were a chain of 8 independent party stores. And it was there that I discovered my true passion is building businesses and helping people achieve great things. Over 13 years, we built that business into Party City's largest franchise with 900 employees, 25 stores in 3 states. So in that job, I held every single position: general counsel, chief merchandising officer, buyer. One day I was unloading a truck and this kid that was working for me said, "Amy, you'd be a great stock guy." So after doing that, I was there about 10 years and I started learning Torah, and it changed my entire life. I realized I had spent my whole day trying to get people to buy things they did not need. I was all about finding like the new product to sell or finding new ways to merchandise and market old products. So could I tell you this story that was like a defining moment in my life?
Absolutely, go for it.
I'm at a Halloween trade show and I'm looking at these 2 Halloween props. There are these guys hanging from nooses and they're dripping blood. So I'm deciding which one of the 2 of them is more disgusting, because they're going to retail for $120. And I know the more disgusting one is going to sell better. So at that moment, I had this revelation. I'm like, God, please let me be cut out for something more than this. But we were making a lot of money and it was still a lot of fun, although it didn't feel good anymore. We ended up selling the business and I wanted to do something for the Jewish people. So I joined a nonprofit media company, which today is OpenDor Media. At the time, it was Jerusalem U. It was there that I discovered that running a nonprofit, a mid-sized nonprofit, is much harder than running a very large for-profit business. After 7 years, I left Jerusalem U for a very high-profile job as CEO of Mosaic United. That's an initiative of the Israeli government to invest in Jewish identity in the diaspora. That job was an absolute privilege, but not a fit for me at all. It was hard to decide what to do next. I did some philanthropic consulting, but I wanted to do something that could make big change across the whole Jewish world. I knew all the Jewish organizations were struggling with fundraising, management, culture, but I didn't know how I could help. Then Mike Levin came to me with the idea of the Jewish Future Pledge, and I knew I wanted to launch it with him. Josh, do you know that right now we're living in such a golden age of wealth that we could secure the entire financial future of every Jewish nonprofit?
I think that to be true. I have some questions about that, but go ahead.
Yeah, well, I call this the $600 billion opportunity. In the next 25 years, an estimated 63 or 68 trillion dollars of wealth is going to pass to the next generation. And they say 6.3 trillion of that is being allocated to charity. So Mike and I decided that we think 20% of that number is Jewish money. Could be 16%, 25%. We picked 20% because we're more than 20% of the Forbes 400 list and we give away a lot of charity. So let's assume that number is true. That would mean there's 1.26 trillion Jewish dollars available for charity in the next 25 years. If everyone did what we asked and signed the Jewish Future Pledge and gave 50% of what they were giving to Jewish causes of the state of Israel, there would be $600 billion available to secure the Jewish future. What do you think the Jewish world costs to run a year?
Well, the numbers I've seen just in the States are around 25 billion.
So I saw a jerk, maybe it is that much. I saw a Jack Wertheimer study, probably 5 years old now, so 25 billion is probably right, that it was 600 billion a year. 6 billion a year, not 600 billion. So if we had 600 billion, we would have more than enough money. That is the opportunity that I think this generation has. Pretty cool, right?
Pretty cool on one hand. The other hand, I actually just wrote about this on Future of Jewish, that sometimes having too much money can be an issue. In fact, if you look at the history of the state of Israel, and you look at the fact that they basically didn't have enough of anything, natural resources, money, allies, as they were founding this great state, that in many ways forced them to be innovative, creative, and so on and so forth, which ultimately led to the great state of Israel that we know and love today. And so I'm wondering, and I'll throw this back to you, is, first of all, there's a lot of money in the Jewish world today. So this idea that, you know, we can put so much more money in, it's nice, but it's not like we're going from 0 to 100. My question is, could that even be a detriment when you have too much of something, that you have less incentive to grow, expand, evolve, experiment, and all the good things that come from not too much of a lack of something, but just enough where you're on that sort of edge that forces you to maybe even be your best?
Well, that's an amazing point and a great, necessity is the mother of invention, right? And so I think you're making a great point. I always came at it from the perspective of when I was running Jerusalem U, like if I could stop fundraising and focus on the business, I could get so much more done. But you make a very legitimate point, and I have heard that from some donors, like they don't even want to give big money to some organizations because they wouldn't know what to do with it. So, you make a legitimate point, but when we created the Jewish Future Pledge, I was really coming from it from the perspective of running a nonprofit, always focused on having to raise money, and it's exhausting and difficult. But I think you make a very good point. Don't announce it on the Jewish Future Pledge, though. The bad news is we're not getting the kind of momentum. I mean, I'm not there anymore, but I don't think people are stepping up the way that they should anyway.
Are you talking about donors, or who are you talking about specifically?
Yeah, donors. I don't know that they're getting the kind of momentum we like.
So tell me a little bit more about that. I mean, what would you like to see from donors, from organizations, as we
from
try
the Jewish Future Pledge?
Well, in general, I mean, yeah.
It's not what I'm doing anymore, but I would like to see. I always thought I would like to see more Jewish donors giving Jewishly. That was my goal, to get Jewish donors to give Jewishly. Not everything they give Jewishly, because I think there's a lot of important stuff in the world, which is why we ask that they give 50% or more to Jewish causes.
So let's go back to some of your experience, the transition, as you pointed out, from being a staunch entrepreneur, in a good way, of course, to then transitioning to the Jewish world, which is predominantly nonprofit, as you mentioned. What were some of the challenges that you experienced, and some of the things that maybe you didn't get in the for-profit sector that enlivened you in the nonprofit one?
So it's hard, like I said, it's harder to run a Jewish nonprofit than it is to run a business. And there are a few reasons. Number one is it's very difficult to prove success, to prove impact. At the end of the year at Party City, I had money in the bank, my net assets were higher. And, I knew I did well. At Jerusalem U, even if I could show 1 million people saw our film, and it cost $1 million, so it was $1 a person, I used to argue, they would say, well, did the film make an impact? And I could show them anecdotal stories, I could do surveys, but you never really know. It's hard to prove impact. Number two is every donor who gives you $36 thinks they could tell you what to do. Number three is you have to be a much more sophisticated leader to run a nonprofit. When I ran Party City, I had my family, but other than that, if I wanted to open a new store, it was a 30-minute decision. Here at Jerusalem U, I have to speak to my biggest donors. I have to speak to my board. I have to, persuade a lot of people. So you have to lead by influence rather than just having the power to make decisions. It's exhausting and it's harder. So, and then often boards change and things like that. So all of a sudden you're working on one initiative and somebody comes in and they want a whole different initiative, or donors try to get you to do their passion projects. So that's why today I do something called I'm working with nonprofits, and I'm teaching something called EOS, or the Entrepreneurial Operating System. Have you ever heard of it?
Because of you, I have.
Okay. So in addition to needing money, I believe nonprofits have and for-profits, I have both nonprofit and for-profit customers, but I believe they need a system for running a truly great business. And that's what EOS is. It's a simple set of practical tools that's used by over 150,000 companies across the globe. And it helps leaders clarify and achieve their vision. Many nonprofits aren't really clear on their vision. It helps them build healthy teams and culture, execute at a consistently high level, and grow their organizations. So let me give you a little context. As I said, I love building businesses. You're doing it. It's so much fun. It's challenging. It's energizing. And for me, I did it twice. It was pure joy until it wasn't, right? Suddenly, what I loved became exhausting. The pace got crazy. The demands were insane. And the personalities were very, very difficult. So instead of being energized, I was always in a bad mood. My kids would call me the bitch CEO. And what I realized at some point, I was no longer running my business, but my business was running me. And that's what's happening with so many Jewish nonprofit leaders, some version of all of those pain points. So I ran the Jewish Future Pledge on EOS, and it was a game changer for me. It was like the first time I ever had a crystal clear vision that I told everybody about, right? Because leadership is about repetition. When I was at JU, I had a crystal clear vision, but I forgot to tell everybody about it because it was so clear in my head. We hired the right people for the right seats. We built a healthy team. Everyone was focused and accountable. When I turned that business over to my successor, it was a turnkey operation. And for the first time, I ran my business instead of my business running me. So that's why I teach EOS to nonprofits, because I believe it's a game changer. And when I find something that I believe is great, I have to share it with everyone. So I have a partner, Esther Mendlowitz, in Israel, and our goal is actually to roll EOS out to the Jewish nonprofit world in the state of Israel, and we're succeeding. We're working with about 17 Jewish nonprofits, and the CEO of EOS is all excited to be in Israel. They're happy to be expanding there, and it's just been tremendous.
I want to get into EOS more with you because it sounds incredibly interesting. I do want to pick apart a few of the things that you mentioned.
Okay.
First one, when I say pick apart, I don't mean pick apart in a bad way. I mean go deeper into.
Okay. That's okay. I like hard questions.
Yeah. So first, you made a statement that a lot of nonprofits are not clear on their vision. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think a lot of it was surprising for me also. I think a lot of nonprofits lost their vision, right? Like what they used to do is no longer relevant. So, I don't really want to name anybody because I don't feel like putting anybody in the hot seat, but I think there were organizations that were doing things that were important, and because of disruption in the industry, they're not important anymore. And so they need to reinvent themselves. I was actually talking to a private equity guy in Israel, and he said to me, I thought the vision would be no problem for the companies he invests in. And he said a lot of times they have a great product, but they lack a vision. I think I was just I've been working with a big Jewish day school, and they were struggling with what's their unique niche in the market and where are they going. And once we clarified that, once we got them really clear on their niche, they came up with this really super energizing 10-year target, and the whole organization and the board, everybody's really excited. But I think what happens with vision, which I think is very important, is there's usually not a lack of vision, but too much vision. So typically when I start with a team, the CEO wants to expand to 8 continents. The CFO just wants another, point or two of profit. And the COO just wants some order. So they're running 3 different businesses. This happens all the time. I think this is the bigger problem. They have 3 different visions. So we have to really crystallize what that one common vision is, get everybody rowing in one direction, and then magic happens.
I want to also get to your comment about, that you were really impassioned by building businesses and helping people achieve great things. In the Jewish world, people know by now that are listening to this that I've been very outspoken for the lack of private sector initiatives in the Jewish world, the predominance of nonprofits, and of course, some Israeli government stuff as well. You mentioned Mosaic and a few other things. My whole thing is when you get the private sector, the nonprofit sector, and government working triangular together, each bringing their unique value, that's when the Jewish world can really be taken to new heights, literally and figuratively. So I'm just wondering, from your viewpoint and how you've experienced things in the Jewish world and as a Jew yourself, why haven't we been able to do a better job of building businesses in the Jewish world?
Well, I first want to say the thing that you said, everything is a system, right? And we have big problems and they require a systemic answer to them. So I'm a huge believer. I love that idea of bringing together the private sector, government, and nonprofits. I'm also a big believer that we need a field approach to philanthropy. So if you take the field of fighting anti-Semitism and you say, okay, we need to teach kids the positive story of Israel. Then we need to have BDS legislation. We need to teach kids how to respond to a BDS thing. What are all the things that we need to win and make sure that the field is appropriately funded? I don't care which foundation takes which, but I'm a big believer that you need a systemic approach to win at these things. So your question was, why can't businesses work in the Jewish nonprofit world? I mean, I think that the reason is there's not enough revenue to make it attractive to your typical investor. So when I was at I don't know if this is such a good example, but when I was at Party City, the Hanukkah department was 8 to 16 feet. And my Christmas department was, aisles and aisles, right? And I was in the greatest Jewish neighborhoods in South Florida. The Jews don't spend as much money as the non-Jews. It's a bigger market. So I believe that probably it hasn't worked because it's not a big enough market to justify the returns.
Right, but isn't it like the chicken or the egg? Because couldn't you make the argument that the nonprofit Jewish sector has been around for decades and hasn't been able to increase our TAM, our total addressable market. And the for-profit sector actually can definitely increase the TAM, which is not just the Jews, but their non-Jewish family, friends, and communities. And so if you have a private sector scalable initiative that is able to increase the TAM and is able to bring in both Jews and non-Jews alike, that your 8 to 16 foot display at Party City in 3 or 5 years can be 80 to 160 feet, because you'll have a lot more Jews coming in to buy a lot more Jewish stuff, and you'll have their non-Jewish family, friends, and communities coming in because they're being invited to the Jewish festivities, so to speak. And all of a sudden, you have a TAM that is great for the Jewish people in terms of building strategic alliances, is great for the investors in this case, is great for the business, is great for seeding other Jewish entrepreneurs to do Jewish things, both in the for-profit and nonprofit sectors. To me, that's, we can talk about it all we want, that there's not a lot of Jewish consumers, so to speak, but I would say that's because precisely that there hasn't been enough Jewish private sector initiative. What would you say to that?
I'd really need to give it some real thought. All that I know is I don't see non-Jews buying Jewish product in a big way. I see non-Jews consuming Jewish content for sure, because we used to, when I was at Jerusalem U, we had a course about Israel and we sold it to the Christians and did extremely well with it. But I don't see them consuming what I was selling at Party City. I'm not educated enough to really give an intelligent answer. I like to stick with what I know.
Sounds good.
And I really believe that it's easier to attract Jewish dollars to nonprofits than it is to an entity like that. But you're raising money, so you'll see if you could get, you'll see what the smart money says.
Definitely. Let's go back to EOS, because I think there's a lot to pick apart there. So, let's say I'm a new customer client of yours. I mean, how does it start? What are some of the things that, you start consulting these different people with to bring the kind of change and impact that they're looking to bring within their organization?
So the EOS model is built on a discovery that every leader is juggling 136 issues at the exact same time. Does that sound like your day?
Well, more or less, yeah, I would say so.
Yeah, I thought it was a little bit light. But what Gino Wickman, the founder of EOS, discovered is those 136 issues are really symptoms of a weakness in one of the 6 key components of your business. And if you strengthen the 6 key components of your business, the 136 issues will fall into place. So what I do is I go on a journey with my customers, for profit and not for profit, and over a period of 2 years, we strengthen those 6 key components. So that's really what the EOS process is about. And every business has these 6 key components: Amazon, Izzy, and the Jewish Federation. So that's what I work on with my clients, and it's been hugely successful. It's blowing out in the for-profit world, and people challenged me at first and said it can't be done in the nonprofit world, and I've proved differently. And my nonprofits are having a lot of success on it.
Can you talk to me a little bit more about those 6 pillars?
Yeah, the 6 key components.
Yeah.
So the first one is vision. We touched on that a little bit. Vision's about getting everyone 100% on the same page with where the organization is going and how it's going to get there, right? So it's getting everyone behind one common vision. So people, this week we capitalize on Jim Collins' great work, right people, right seats. So the truth is, right people, right seats is different for every organization. So we define that, we get crystal clear on what the right people are in the right seats. I have one of my clients, and he said to me, Amy, he was an HR guy. He said, Amy, this is the first time I'm hiring for what I need, not just random great people that I meet. So we create a plan. What people do you need? Your business is here, you want to get here. What's the people plan? So that's right people, right seats. The next is data, running your business based on facts, figures, and objective information, not ego, gut, and feelings, which very often drives decision-making in entrepreneurial businesses. So when I started at Party City, there was no data. Today, we're drowning in data. We got to find like 5 to 15 numbers to run your business on. Get rid of that analysis paralysis. So what happens when you have a crystal clear vision, you have great people, and you run your business on data? All of your issues, all of your problems become crystal clear and transparent. So there's sort of two extremes on the approach to issues. There's the one a lot of leaders take, which is they pray they will go away, they ignore them. Issues are like mushrooms. When you keep them in the dark, they grow and they fester. So that's our fourth key component, is issues. We take an open, honest approach to issues, and my teams become issues-solving machines. Some of my clients cannot believe how many issues we solve in such a short period of time, some of these issues that have been around for years. So the fifth key component is processes. Processes is about doing things the best and right way every single time, making your business scalable, easy to manage, and more profitable. It's a very overlooked component. And the last key component is traction. So traction, which is my favorite one, is GSD, getting stuff done. You've heard of a million visions that don't get executed. It's because they lack traction. Vision without traction is simply hallucination, and that is EOS in a nutshell. I work with teams to get 80% strong in each of those 6 key components.
I love that. I think that's really interesting. I want to go back to number 2, which I think you said was getting the right people on the right seats. And this actually kind of relates to Jewish Future Pledge, because first of all, I hope you guys are successful. It will be good for the Jewish people, for the Jewish world. But, you have this injection of tremendous amount of money going into different nonprofits, the ones that exist today, the ones that will exist in the future. A lot of the nonprofits don't have the right people in the right seats. We talked about a little bit about it, before we hit record here, which is that, like you were hired, for example, for Jerusalem U, which is now OpenDor Media, as the CEO to run the organization, but then here you are spending all your time on fundraising. It just feels to me that, as somebody told me the other day, throwing good money, which is this transfer of wealth, after bad, which is not necessarily the right people in the right seats in many of these Jewish organizations, is not going to fix that principle number 2 of EOS.
That's why my play with EOS has always been to donors, because if you're investing so much money in an organization, let's give them the coaching and the system they need to succeed. You're right. A lot of nonprofits have right people in the wrong seats because they have some rabbi who they made CEO, and the job suddenly they're like running a big company and they lack the skill set for that. So the first thing we do is we figure that out, and then we work to get the right people in the right seats. But there are, that's why EOS is so attractive to these organizations or to the donors, because they want to run great organizations, and great leaders want to run great organizations. Listen, I teach EOS because every mistake I made at Party City and at Jerusalem U would have been avoided if I had this system. I knew it no better at Party City when I was running a gigantic business than I did at Jerusalem U. The reason this business is exploding, most people don't have the skill set for this. The problems that exist in the nonprofit world also exist in the for-profit world.
Right, but in my experience, which is a lot more in the for-profit world than in the nonprofit world, there's a different set of organizing logic. I mean, of course, ego exists in both worlds. You talked about, making gut decisions, that exists in both worlds. But it feels to me that there's a lot more accountability in the for-profit world, for the simple fact that there's generally more supply of available talent than demand. So you can always replace people with equally skilled, if not more skilled, more experienced, more suitable folks. The other thing too is, the writing's on the wall in many cases, especially in the digital world where data is, as you said, abundant and quite black and white when you're looking at the bottom line of a business, and either you're growing the business or you're not. I think as Ray Kroc used to say, either you're green and growing or you're red and rotting. And so, I'm just wondering, like, EOS seems genius for the for-profit sector, But for the nonprofit sector, and specifically for the Jewish nonprofit sector, I'm wondering that if the issues are so systemic that something like EOS can have an impact, but won't maybe be able to have the kind of impact that would then create the kind of transformations that I think you and I both want to see in the Jewish world. What is your experience in that regard?
Well, first of all, you touched on like three different things. The firing point is a good point. Like I had one potential client, a major Jewish organization I was talking to, and he said, Amy, we can never fire anybody. It's not Jewish. And I said, first of all, you're not a potential client. I believe if you have the right person in the wrong seat, it's bad for them and it's bad for you. I don't think it's good for either person. And I think your real obligation is to the donor. You're holding somebody else's money. And I think you have an ethical obligation to spend that money correctly. So that for sure is a problem. As far as hiring, that problem exists in the for-profit and not-for-profit world. The difference with the advantage that nonprofits have is this younger generation, a lot of them want meaning. When we were all growing up, we all thought life was about money. This generation is not driven by money in the same way. So when kids are looking, I find a lot of people are looking for a strong why, and the hiring problem exists across both sectors. As far as growing, there's two kinds of growth, and this was one of my big mistakes. There's external growth, grow. I was always a big external growth girl, right? Whether it was Party City or Jerusalem U, we had extensive growth. But sometimes an organization is in strong need of internal growth, right? You grow so much, in EOS, we call it, you hit a ceiling, right? And in order to break through that ceiling, you need to put in internal systems and processes and build a team so you could break through the ceiling and get to the next level. There are a lot of Jewish organizations that need that internal structure. They're lacking it, and they don't know how to go about doing it. So I also don't think there's a silver bullet for the Jewish world. You're a little more optimistic about it. I think that it needs to be, I love the way you're thinking. It's phenomenal and it's important, but I think there are still a lot of great Jewish organizations that are doing great work and changing hearts and minds and turning people on to Israel. And it's really a privilege to work with these organizations and help them get better. And that's what I do all day long. It's, when the EOS is not for the faint of heart. When you start, it's usually a little bit rocky,
Of course.
There's issues that have been around for years, but when I'm with a team a year later and I see them come together and have a clear vision and talking to each other. I had teams that weren't even speaking to each other in the beginning, and now they're working together towards one common goal, and it's so rewarding, and they are making a difference. I don't have one big answer, but I know this is working, and I'm privileged to be able to do it.
I want to go back to a comment you made a few minutes ago, big change across the Jewish world. First of all, can you define for us what you mean by big change?
Well, I think the biggest problem the Jewish world faces right now is apathy. I do not think we have made a good case for why be Jewish. I was a result of that. I had no reason to be Jewish, and I think that there's many amazing reasons to be Jewish, right? I now love being Jewish. I was the least Jewish person around, and today I'm like Miss Jew. We have tremendous wisdom, right? Like I couldn't believe when I started to learn Jewish wisdom that I spent my whole life without knowing all of this. I went to law school, like I love learning, and our wisdom, we're the best. It's deep, it's smart. I use it in business, I use it in life. So our wisdom is tremendous. But I think people attach to Judaism in different ways. They say there are 70 faces of Torah. And I think that we have to find ways to connect to people and turn them on to why be Jewish. And I don't know that it's a mass solution. I think that it's a lifetime. And it's a million different touch points. Like when somebody would say to me, oh, did you change them with a film? Like people are impacted by a million different things, right? And it's the same thing with Party City. Like somebody would say, oh, if they clicked on the last ad that they saw of mine, that ad wasn't necessarily what worked. They saw a billboard, they, saw a TV commercial. There's attribution. Many things affect the end outcome. So a film helps, a Shabbos dinner helps. I think there's a lot of things we need to do. And we're a people that should be celebrated. Look at us. We're an amazing, amazing people. We have survived against all odds. It's like an incredible story. I was watching the prime ministers the other night. Look at what we built. We're a nation that survived the Holocaust, and we're doing amazing things. We're great people. And I think we need to celebrate who we are, share what we are, stop being embarrassed, and be proud, but not in a cocky way, in a way about giving back, which is what we're all about. Chosen isn't chosen to be great, it's chosen for responsibility.
Well, it's so interesting that you said that, because Al Eckstein, who's just a few episodes before you, was saying that, I can't remember the name of the rabbi, but he said the Jews are the chosen people so that we can make the rest of the world feel that they're actually the chosen people. And so I think that's really interesting.
I love that. I love that, because we are here to serve. The Jewish version of leadership is the leaders at the bottom holding everybody else up. It's servant leadership.
That's right. Let's talk about apathy a little bit, because I think you're definitely onto something. And, I'm just wondering, why do you think that apathy exists at the level it does?
I mean, I think that it's probably in my generation, our parents, weren't, I think that we did a terrible job of educating our kids. I think that my generation was not educated. I got lucky to get educated, at 45 years old. And hopefully I did a better job. But I think the priority in many families is soccer and, how smart your kid is. It's not on, who are we and what are we? I think, the real answer is what's going on in the houses, in the homes.
Right. But also, okay, that's fair. So it starts and ends in the home. I think you could say that about a lot of issues, not just Jewish.
Oh, yeah, for sure. But the homes aren't focused. We when we were at Jerusalem U, we used to say, how can we make Israel dinner table conversation, right? And people weren't talking about it at dinner.
Right, but also parents need tools, right? I mean, and Shabbat candles could be a tool, and challah could be a tool.
Right.
And a film could be a tool, and social media content, so on and so forth. And so I think what I'm wondering is the folks that today and previously have been providing these tools, which could be local JCCs, local synagogues, could be local book clubs, could be the state of Israel, the government, the Ministry of Diaspora Affairs, or so on and so forth. Are they providing enough of the right tools in terms of quality, in terms of accessibility? One of the biggest knocks on Jewish education is that it's just too damn expensive. And it's not that people can't afford it, it's that they'd rather spend the money in other places because they don't value it at the level that the school is charging to send their kid or multiple kids to have a Jewish education on a day-to-day basis. So I'm just wondering, okay, so we can identify some of the issues, but more importantly, what are some of the solutions or some of the opportunities? You as an entrepreneur, I know you're hungry for opportunities all the time. What are some of the opportunities that we can take advantage of or create to deal with this Jewish apathy?
Well, I think there's some very innovative, great organizations. OpenDor Media, Momentum is amazing. Are you familiar with Momentum?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, they're doing an amazing job. Birthright, One Table. There's so many great organizations that are. Chabad is killing it. They're all. Aish is doing a great job. They've really upped their social media and their content. I think there's a lot of good, innovative stuff out there. That is, and the Maccabi Games, I think, is a great connector. I haven't really thought about it in a long time about what these things, because I've been so into EOS. You're getting back into my brain about I think I read on something that you wrote, the need to rebrand Judaism. I was laughing because I went through a whole thing where I wanted to rebrand God. I thought that God had a bad brand. So I was going to
Interesting.
take on being his branding department.
But hold on, I want to
Uh,
ask you something because this is interesting. So in one breath, you just said that Jewish apathy is an issue. On the other hand, you just said that all these organizations are doing great work. Something's not adding up here. I mean, we can't.
because they're touching such a small percentage of people, right? They're touching such a small percentage of people, and it's not enough, right? Like what change, behavioral change is hard. You know how behavioral change is hard. It took me 10 years till I started to really believe in God. I came in with such a negative perception. And it took a lot of time and a lot of energy. I think it's a slow process to get people to really buy into it. And you need great teachers, you need a great community, and you need great content. And a great system like EOS.
Definitely, but again, I just want to make sure that we're talking about the most pertinent issues in the Jewish world, because if you and I agree or disagree on something, but we don't actually create the kind of change that we want to see in the Jewish world at the level that we, like you talked about behavioral change, then we're just wasting each other's time, frankly. So I want to try to make this productive, not just for us, but also for the listeners, in that, okay, so let's just continue to ask the question why, right? I'm sure you know the 5 whys from Toyota, very famous
Well,
system of
I teach that when we're trying to identify root causes.
So okay, so now we're saying that these organizations, while they are doing great work, which we agree on, they're not reaching the level of scale that creates the kind of impact and therefore behavioral change to make the kind of difference that can counteract, for example, apathy, as you mentioned, maybe anti-Semitism, some other issues. Right. So why are they not reaching the scale that we think they should be reaching, or they ought to reach, in order to create this kind of change?
Well, I thought it was money, right? So if you take an organization like Momentum, which I think is amazing, I think every Jewish mother should go on Momentum. And then I think that you need like top down and bottom up, right? Why do I believe in Momentum so much? Because when I changed, I put my kids in Jewish day school. I now have a kid in Israel. My husband is very involved in the Jewish community. You change a mother, you change the whole family. However, that needs to also be supported bottom up, right? You need Jewish camping, you need day school if they're willing to go. I don't think you're going to get a large number in day school, but you need bottom up and top down. And then you need them throughout every part of their life cycle, right? I think that the most important part of the life cycle for young kids is post-college, pre-marriage, right? That's where we touch them, I think, the least. Moishe House, I know, does a really good job. But I once did a study. I was trying to think about, we did a study. I did it when I was at OpenDor Media. And I was trying to figure out, if you were to market Judaism, like who do you market to, and what's the most attractive message? And in high school, we discovered kids are interested in being popular, right? In college, they're thinking about their careers, but when they're older, they're most open to learning and growing. And that's when they're about to make the biggest decisions of their life, who they're going to marry, which changes everything. I think that's the single biggest decision you make. And so I think it needs to be throughout their entire lives repetitively, because we're competing against unbelievable marketing. When you talk about Jewish content, you're competing against, stuff that's coming, out of Disney, right? Am I going to watch a Disney movie, or going to watch a movie from OpenDor Media? Our product has to be of that level and be so good consistently.
Right. So I think there's 2 things there that are interesting. One is the quality of the product. We'll touch on that in a second, but I want to go back to, you said that there's not enough money, but we talked about at the beginning of the podcast that you said 6 billion, I said 25 billion. That's just in the US. So,
but it's not being given. It's not being given to Jewish causes.
No. That's money in the Jewish world. I mean, the 25 billion that I'm clear about is money that is given every year to the Jewish world. I would argue that there's too much redundancy across organizations in the Jewish world, that we're all sort of not doing the same thing, but kind of doing the same thing. And then we're
Definitely.
also chasing trends. I mean, I won't mention the name of the organization, but I just spoke with somebody in New York the other day that all of a sudden is getting into the BDS game because, that's an easy way to raise money today.
Yeah,
And,
exactly. That everybody does that. Yep.
no, and so that's what I'm saying. So, the other thing with the nonprofits is, you want to make a great movie. Are you making a great movie in the eyes of the donors who are funding the movie? Or are you making a great movie in the eyes of the people that are going to pay $10 a month for Izzy or $15 a month for a movie ticket at the theater or whatever it is? Because at a certain point, if these organizations want to not just survive, they'll continue to survive, but if they want to thrive and make difference and change in the world, they're going to have to start generating their own revenue at scale. And, if you look at, we'll use OpenDor Media as an example. I mean, their information's online, so anyone can see it. But if you look at, they'll tell you they have this robust YouTube channel. And even if you go on their YouTube channel, you'll see hundreds of thousands of views. Only 1% of their revenues, I believe they had a $6 million, maybe even $8 million budget in 2021. Again, this is all public information, so I'm not, leaking anything. 1% of that $6 or $8 million came from YouTube. So things are not adding up, Amy. And I think that we have to start having some really honest conversations about, because I hear it from you and I hear it from a lot of people, you don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. Everyone's doing a great job, but are they really? And do we need to raise the bar to a point where we can start demanding more of these organizations, of these people, and also start to constructively criticize and ultimately try to help them, or if not, create new organizations that don't have the baggage of some of these older ones in order to get us to where we want to go? Because you're a very smart woman. You've accomplished a lot in your life. And on the other hand, we're not holding ourselves to the level that I think we need to be holding ourselves and saying, listen, something's not working here. And we can continue to drill down as we've done a little bit on this episode. But it seems to me like the issues that we're talking about, money, scale, I mean, the rest of the world seems to be achieving this every day. The Jewish world, which has some of the most talented, smart, great people in the world, why can't we figure it out?
Well, I think that there are a lot of egos in the room. Like I've sat in many of these big donor groups and, everybody's got their own agenda and we have to create common goals, right? Like, this one wants this one wants that. So I think that's part of the problem. But the reason an organization, I can't speak to it now, but like when I ran OpenDor Media, the reason we didn't have more revenue, I spent all my time raising money. Like I used to say, if I could spend 10 minutes thinking about the business, the way I thought about how to create new product for Party City, it would be great for the business, right? All day long, I was raising money. But I had a choice because there were times I could sell content or I could get content out. Like I remember very clearly, we made a film called Honor Diaries about women's rights in Muslim countries. My joke is it's a very short movie. Because they have no rights. But we did a deal with some company and they offered us $15,000 and we could get the film out like that day to millions of people. So I could spend 6 or 9 months negotiating, to maybe get to $75,000 or $100,000, or I could serve my goal of educating the people, right? Because my goal wasn't to make money, my goal was to educate. So I found often that though making money versus, reaching a lot of people were two different things. So if I wanted to get product in a day school, I would think, oh, let's charge them, right? We went through this whole thing, let's charge them. So if we're charging them $200 or $1,000, like it's 55 conversations, with everybody and their mother. And then at the very end, some teacher won't like it and the deal will fall through it. Like it wasn't worth the return on investment wasn't worth it to me. So it's complicated. You need to really figure out the revenue model, but I found it was easier to generate revenue via fundraising.
Right, that makes sense. It's an interesting way of looking at it. I mean, I was just having this conversation last night with a friend of mine who works at a startup here in Tel Aviv, and we were talking about B2B versus B2C. And he was saying, enterprise software is more worth it because yeah, it takes longer to get a sale, but the sale is worth over the lifetime of that customer 10,000, 100,000, a million, depending on what you're selling. If you're doing B2C or D2C today, like Izzy taking $10 a month from a customer, maybe our customer lifetime value is $150, $200 on a good day. It's that sort of thinking of, B2B, B2C, fundraising versus selling either to schools or to other organizations or directly to consumers. So that conversation does happen outside of the Jewish world as well, which I find interesting. Thank you so much for your time, Andy. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. It's been really fun. Hard questions.